Welcome to Hoko Politzo's Poetry Moment, featuring Josephine Jacobsen's Gentle Reader. I'm Sean Sebastian Nahr. Emily Dickinson wrote a letter in 1870 trying to explain what poetry meant to her. If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold, no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. These are the only ways I know it. Is there any other way? Dickinson wrote. This poetry moment resonates with Dickinson's famous lines about the power of literature. Baltimore's own, the very proper Josephine Jacobsen wrote a poem called Gentle Reader. With her etiquette-wise title, Jacobsen gives a sly nod to 19th century novels such as Jane Eyre. But Jacobsen's poems capture the shock of reading poetry in a way that is most ungentle. With her cap of careful curls, her pastel jackets, and her soft tones, Jacobsen looked as ladylike as she acted. I expect that if I look in the dictionary and see the word lady, it will be Josephine's picture, said poet Lucille Clifton in the 2003 Memorial Tribute Show from which this footage is taken. She was always such a person who valued others and understood there were a lot of ways of being a good poet. But this lady spoke about poetry like a mystic, a lover, a cult leader. In the first stanza, Jacobsen sets up a normal evening of reading a poem with a backdrop of city and stars. But by the end of the first stanza, the poem's speaker has encountered a poet dangerous and steep, and we're about to head off the cliff with this gentle reader. The poem juices her like a press and eats her gut and marrow, Jacobsen writes. Her ears lust. At the end of the poem, enthusiastically agrees with James Joyce's Molly Bloom. Yes, 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 oh, yes. That ecstasy is not often equated with poetry. Sometimes it is necessary, however, to describe a visceral response to a juicy poem. Not well recognized as a poet until she was in her 70s, and with no college education, Jacobsen wrote essays, op-ed pieces, poetry, and short stories most of her life. But she served a term as the nation's poet laureate, and in 1997, she won the Robert Frost Medal for Lifetime Achievement in Poetry. Both joy and terror lived in Jacobsen's poetry. And underneath lay a kind of mystery, the same source of Dickinson's cold fire and Jacobsen's savage sight. Jump off that steep and dangerous cliff, holding hands with a nice lady who loved poetry. And now, Josephine Jacobsen's Gentle Reader.
This is called Gentle Reader, and it is about the experience of reading a great poem. Late in the night, when I should be asleep, under the city stars in a small room, I read a poet. A poet, not a versifier, not a hotshot ethic monger laying about him, not a diary of lying about in cruel, cruel beds crying. A poet, dangerous and steep. Oh God, it peels me, juices me like a press. This poetry drinks me, eats me, gut and marrow.
Until I exist in its jest of sorrow. Until my juices feed a savage sight that runs along the lines bright as beasts' eyes. The rubble splays to dust, city, book, bed, leaving my ears lust, saying like Molly, yes, yes, yes. Oh, yes.